Hey guys, today we're gonna be fixing our Kawasaki STX160lx. It had a bit of an issue with stuttering, as you can see in the video. Every time you really give it some throttle, you can feel it's not getting fuel, or there's something just off with it. It has no power, you can't get it up to speed. And so I went online, did some research, found that it could either be the breather hose, checked everything, that was fine. And that meant it was either the pump or there was something else. We got the spark plugs changed out already because I had some other suggestions from other people that it could be that. I had the injectors cleaned, none of that made a difference. So on Reddit I found one post from Scubas1973 which said it could be a bad fuel filter, and other people had said it could be a bad fuel pump. Now with that being said, I really didn't want to buy a new pump because I live in Paraguay. Really hard to find the actual pump here. Over New Year's even more so. And so I decided to clean the fuel filter. Not as much recommended. I would highly suggest you actually exchange it, which I will do next time it starts stuttering. I'm gonna buy a new one so I have it ready for the next time it does it. But let's take the fuel pump out, get it cleaned up, and see if that will fix the problem. Alex from the future here. We just had it out on the water all afternoon. And right at the end we did notice it did start stuttering again. So while it did help for a little bit of time, it didn't fix the problem completely. So I will be taking it apart again, showing you guys exactly how to do it with a little more details. But for now we will show you guys how to clean the fuel filter, so enjoy that video. I wanted to check online if there was any videos on how to get access to the fuel pump on an easier way, but couldn't find anything. So here is my video, or I guess my journey of doing it. There is a few things I would do differently next time, but to get started we need to take off the side panels. That will give us access to the screws holding in the plastic cover over the handlebars or underneath the handlebars, and right underneath that you have a hatch where you can actually access that fuel pump. Now this was a little bit tricky because you have the reverse and forward lever there, but we do get it off eventually. Also, I will mention there is 3 screws holding it in from the inside of the engine bay that you also need to remove. And next up you have to remove these little nuts, and do yourself a favor. Right there is a little bit of a cable connecting the forwards to backwards lever, and unhook that. It'll make your life so much easier. I didn't do it right here, but as I said, I kind of learned from this experience to see how to do it. But do yourself the favor, unhook that at the beginning, just it's gonna save you a bit of a headache of trying to remove the cover later on. Now, I said remove the cover, we're just gonna move it out of the way, so technically it's not removing it completely, but once you turn it, you can then get access to the whole hatch area from the fuel pump. And we're now on the other side, we're gonna remove this as well. I had thought once I remove these screws it would just be simply lifted up and you'd be good to go, but I soon realized there's the immobilizer cable, there's the clock cables in the front, there's a little bit of an antenna, which I'm not going to show you this time. I kind of didn't film it too much. I was a bit in a hurry to get this thing up and running again. But if I was to do this whole project again, I would start with the plastic covers around the handlebars, get that whole thing out of the way. Next, I would then also remove these plastic covers. There's the little antenna right by the gauges in the front. Remove the antenna. And also there's a little cable clip on the steering column, which I removed this time. One thing I did notice while this whole project, I had screws missing on various plastic parts, so I will eventually order a new screw kit. I don't know if it was the previous owner if they had done something to it, because I got it with 16 hours, so it was basically new, or if it came from factory like it, the way it was. But there was a few screws missing here by the steering column. Also, there was some very loose screws on the steering column underneath that plastic where the cable tie was tied into. When I went to loosen it, I could just unscrew it with my hand. Now, I would probably just untie the cable tie next time. It's just a little metal piece which is wrapped around the cable so it stays in place. If you would just unwrap that, you could then move the antenna out of the way, and it also loosens up everything enough so that you can move the whole plastic cover out of the way. And now back to my progress. As you guys can see, I have now figured out that I do have to take the plastics off of that whole steering assembly. And I thought it would be a little bit easier, but I eventually got all these screws out. You have to then take off the whole little light gray piece, remove the front plastic, and then that back plastic is really stubborn to get off. That head scratching, yeah, I'm kind of contemplating whether or not I should continue with the project, but we're gonna push on. We're not gonna get held up here, and I really just want to test it to see if it is actually the pump or if it was just the filter. Now, as you guys can see, this part took a lot longer. I think I played around for it around 10 minutes, which I eventually found they were just held in with pressure and with a little bit of force, and well, try to be careful not to break anything, but you know, with a little bit of force I got that out of the way. And with that done, I thought it was just gonna be as easy as just to kind of turn this to the side and then I would have access to that door. Now, obviously it wasn't quite that easy. My next genius plan was I saw a little bit of a gray piece which I thought was a nut holding the immobilizer into place. So my plan was to remove that, loosen it up enough so that I could then actually turn it. Now don't do that. I luckily couldn't actually reach the nut. So I kind of just left the immobilizer in place and figured out in the front it has the little antenna. I believe it's for GPS, but in reality I have no idea. Once I had that removed and removed the little cable clip or cable tie in the front, you can then move the whole thing sideways and actually get access to that little panel where the whole fuel pump is. As you guys can see, with the whole cable clip and the antenna removed, we are going to be able to actually turn this around and voila. It's that simple. Yeah, if you're doing this the first time and you're kind of guessing, it's a fun little process. But we got up to this point, we're not gonna stop now. As you guys can see, right in this little hatch area, down there is the whole fuel pump assembly. So let's get to removing that whole thing. Now, don't do it like I did. I took the whole top cover off of this clip. In reality, you just need to push in that little side clip, and with that you can then unplug the plug from the top. Next, take off the fuel line first and then start unscrewing it. It's just gonna make your life a lot easier, but as we are figuring this out, I realized there's one of those little screws right underneath the fuel cable. To get the fuel cable off, you have to remove this top clip. It has two little holders on the side. And yeah, we're not going to be able to do this just with one hand in there. So we're going to remove the camera, take that whole thing off, and we will be right back with our video. There we go. That's done. It's a lot easier if you just edit it out, but it's a bit of a pain to get out. Next, we're going to remove all the little screws that are holding this top ring in place. And once those are all out, the whole fuel pump assembly can then come out. Do be careful not to drop your screws in. Ooh, that was a mini heart attack right there, but luckily it didn't fall far, so we're just gonna take them out one by one, not risk it. And this is a bit of a tricky little puzzle that you have to play around with. Be very careful not to bend the fuel sensor, or I guess the fuel gauge, and how much fuel is in there. It's a thin piece of wire that is holding the float up. So don't just force it out, do kind of wriggle it out until you can take it out of the whole assembly. We're gonna dump some of the extra fuel. You should probably have a container to do this in, but we're just quickly gonna let it drain out here. And let's get to taking it apart. It has two clips on the side. Terrible filming. Yeah, I know, we'll get better at it with time. But if you take those, press in those two clips, you can take the bottom part out. That should not be that dirty. I don't know exactly when we had such bad and such dirty fuel, but the whole fuel filter was clogged up. It was very dirty. I even had little pieces of debris in the whole thing. Now, this is the part which I would highly suggest you do not copy what I am doing. Just get yourself a new fuel filter, replace it, and be done with it. That way you don't need to worry about it actually having to reopen everything later on to exchange it. Now, while we have everything out, we're also gonna blow through the pump and the whole top assembly. There's a few clips holding this bottom piece in. Once you remove those, you have access to the fuel pump itself. There's a little O-ring that is holding that into place there as well. Make sure not to lose that right there. As you guys can see, that has to stay in there. Blow through everything once, make sure there's no debris in the pump, make sure there's no debris in the top part, and do it the first time. Don't do it like I did. I assembled everything and then realized I hadn't cleaned the top part, so I had to take everything apart again and start from scratch. While you do reassemble it, make sure not to actually clamp those or pinch those cables right there. But you know, it's pretty simple to do, not all too hard. But save yourself the trouble of having to put it back together, reopen it again. As you guys can see right here, I realized I hadn't cleaned it. And let's get everything fixed up. Add the fuel filter, cleaned it out again, blowing through it just to get most of the debris out. And I also did rinse it with fuel one more time just to make sure that all the alcohol was off of it. And with that, we could then reassemble the whole fuel pump assembly and put it back in. Now, yeah, I realized that my whole filming here was terrible. I'll try to do a bit of a better job next time when I do replace that filter, because I will be ordering a new one and actually replacing it just to be on the safe side. So we're gonna clean out this last little piece, the whole container on the bottom, reassemble it, and then we will move back to the jet ski. Now, since we did have a fuel issue, I decided to drain the whole fuel from the jet ski, all the old fuel, and refilter it later on to be reused. And this whole thing is a bit of a pain. Now, if you have a fuel pump, this whole thing would be so much easier, but I didn't. So we're gonna do it through a siphon with the hose, and with some movie magic, which is called editing, we are gonna make this look seamless. You know, you kind of just suck on it, and with that, it's done. Yeah, this took way longer than it should have. It wasn't quite that easy. But with that done, with the fuel out of the tank, there's just a tiny bit left. We're gonna use a towel and a bucket just to get the last little bit out. As you guys can see, my amazing wife was with me helping as well, and also serving some today. And I couldn't quite reach, so I just dried it off as best I could. Used a vacuum cleaner to take out the last little bit of dust or stuff that was in there. And with that, we are ready to put the fuel pump back in its place. And now remember that it was a bit tricky getting it out. Yeah, it was kind of the same story getting it back in, but it was a little bit easier. And oh yeah, there's a little O-ring that goes between the tank and the fuel pump assembly. If you do decide to take it out, which I had done, make sure you place that in there before you place the fuel pump in. You can get it in afterwards, but it is a little bit of a pain to get in. Now, there is a few little things that I realized at the end of putting this whole thing together. Not sure if you guys can see, there's a few little taps. My genius brain had said I'm gonna turn the fuel pump assembly around a little bit, so we're not gonna be covering that last little screw, so it'll be easier to take out next time. Also, as you guys can see right here, the O-ring does have to be aligned properly in there. And yeah, looking at the videos now, I realized I didn't take out all the little debris that was down by the tank there. But I think for now we'll be okay. Now remember those little tabs that I mentioned? Those do have to be lined up. There's one at the top, one at the side there. And another thing to mention, that cable right there. Yeah, your screw isn't gonna go in there if that is covering it up. I realized that later on. I also pinched it a little bit. Luckily no cables were harmed in the process, but just make sure that that cable is out of the way as well, and that you have those tabs lined up, otherwise you're not gonna get that pump in. With that installed, all that's left to do is plug it back in and get our fuel line hooked up. I did decide to do this one-handed while filming. It was a pain. You know, if you're just doing this yourself, it'll be a lot easier. Use both your hands and just make sure that it's all the way on. Push that little clip back on and you should be good to go. Right there, I haven't pushed on the clip. Do push on that clip, otherwise your cable could come loose. Now, all that's left to do is do the reverse process. Screw in your little antenna in the front, screw in your cable tie in the front, and make sure everything is the way it was when you took it apart. After that, I did remove this top cover. Don't think that was absolutely necessary, but if you do want to actually remove it, make sure to open it all the way, pull up, and same position, just reverse to put it back in. Let's add the side covers right here, and right here my camera died. But we're gonna do that to the other side as well. And with that, the whole jet ski is back into its original condition. Let's go take it out for a spin and see if it fixed the problem. Hey guys, it's a new day and I didn't quite get to, well, I did get to test the Kawa yesterday, but I didn't have time to film it. And it's currently raining, but our guests wanted the jet ski in the water. So we are now putting the jet ski in the water. I'm going to show you guys how it works, and it works amazing. It's impressive. The cleaning of that filter, it was all that it was needed. The whole injection cleaning wasn't necessary, new spark plugs wasn't necessary. While the new spark plugs did come at an advantage because we did a maintenance on it as well. So it needed new sparks anyways, since I wasn't quite sure if the previous owner had done the maintenance. So we got that out of the way. But with the cleaning of that filter, it works amazing. We are now by the lake. We are gonna put the jet ski in, and I will show you guys how it runs. And that was it. That was the video on how to replace the fuel filter, or I guess this time clean it. I will be replacing it as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Now I will probably be replacing it first to see if that fixes the problem completely. If not, I will be replacing the pump. Now I'm considering just straight up replacing the pump to get rid of all the issues, and I will be filming that whole process as well. And that was it for today. So as you guys saw, I just went out for a test drive and it does stutter again. So we had it running for a couple of hours. As I mentioned beforehand, it was running fine. The fix seemed to be working great. But right at the end there, it did start to stutter again, and I'm gonna have to do something, either replace the fuel filter or I will have to replace the actual fuel pump. If I do have to replace it, I will probably be upgrading it a little bit to get a bit more performance out of it and to solve that issue. But it did seem to be working fine up until it gets a little bit warmer. Then you start to notice that it's losing power and stuttering. Now, while I love working on the engines, I would love to get through the summer without issues on either one of these jet skis. As you can see, I have the Sea-Doo Tricks right behind me there, on that side the Kawasaki STX160. And hopefully I will be able to do more videos just like this on how to fix either one of them. And yeah, hopefully I will not have to do too much during the summer, because we do rent them out for our guests to use. And since we're one of the only places here in Paraguay or around this whole area where we are that rents them, they are in pretty high demand, especially during summer. So hopefully with the fix on the fuel filter or fuel pump, that the car will be running smoothly all summer, and then in winter time we'll see what we're gonna do with it. But for now, that is it. If you enjoyed this content, like and subscribe for more, and stay tuned.